they have great concerns over the costs. And if Honda were to choose not to renew their engine deal with IndyCar, that would be the reason why. And we'll bring Matt White back in here to talk about this first story. Good to see you, Matt. How shocking is this news, especially considering you just had IndyCar President Jay Fry say the partnership between Chevrolet and Honda has been phenomenal. He mentioned postponing the hybrid engine. Why would a phenomenal partner like Honda say publicly that they're willing to leave?
Well, good evening, Ben. Hello, everybody. Yeah, big news. Well, a couple of sort of intertwining stories, I guess, in this whole IndyCar saga of the week. Let's talk about the postponement first of what we thought was coming at the beginning of the year and now been pushed back. And it immediately reminds me of what would have potentially happened down in Australia last year when supercars were going to split their season in half and bring the new car in halfway through. And then that was all pushed back due to delays and COVID and everything else that had rumbled through. So that was going to be a thing in supercars last year, where we were going to have basically two halves of a season with two sets of rules, basically, for what they were playing with. I mean, I was kind of looking forward to it. We've had some of the tests been going on already since the end of the season, and it was looking like, all the light was green for St. Pete at the end of February, beginning of March for the opening race. Now it's been pushed back to after the 500, straight into that really, normally massively busy period for IndyCar between the 500 and, of course, now we've got the Olympic break in the middle of that this year. So it's going to be a hugely intensive time for the teams. Throwing this new curveball of engine layout and technology and everything in there is just going to be probably a huge headache for everybody. But especially you have to think of the lesser funded, lower budget, smaller teams that are just going to be given this box of kit and basically be told to get on with it. Which is, Penske running 3 cars, Ganassi running 5 cars. They've got huge resources and stuff, but it's the smaller teams I worry about. And if Honda also potentially waving the IndyCar white flag, then we're going to have no smaller teams and no second engine manufacturer to field in those smaller teams. It's worrying, isn't it, for IndyCar, which we'll get to shortly, has a massive opportunity to stop shooting itself in the foot against other single-seater championships around the world, and it keeps doing it to itself.
Well, Matt, to your point, Honda supplies more than half of the full-time IndyCar teams with engines. We know they've been looking for a third engine supplier for a long time. Once upon a time, we had rumors of Alfa Romeo coming in. That got people hopeful, but that hasn't worked out. And the recent article from motorsport.com suggests they're looking at the WEC after their F1 exit. We know people have been asking IndyCar to add more ovals. We just recently lost Texas, but we added Milwaukee. But having lost Texas, that's the only other race that was the only other race besides the 500 that was using the Super Speedway Aero kit. So that'll be a one-race deal next year. We've seen people talking about IndyCar marketing needing improvement. We haven't really seen any meaningful steps forward on that front. We were talking backstage. Some people still think the Indy 500 is a NASCAR race won with Formula One cars because they don't know what the IndyCar series is. And recently, one of their young stars, Pato O'Ward, said the quiet part out loud. A lot of Americans have no idea what IndyCar is. That's a direct quote from Pato O'Ward in that Racer.com article. So is it reasonable for people to start questioning the leadership of this current IndyCar administration, specifically Roger Penske, and his ability to lead this series to a better place?
I mean, perhaps. I mean, there's been lots of things that have happened in the last little while. You talk about the calendar. It just kind of been a bit stagnant for ages. The market, we've spoken at length on this show about the poor marketing of the series in territories around the races, and then further afield nationally. The whole hubbub that's gone on with iRacing and the game that's now gone as well. That could have been a big push for the casual fan to get back involved with IndyCar, but that's now gone by the by, it seems, or at least potentially for the meantime. It's you look at Formula One, and we've had obviously the longest season ever, TM. The domination of Red Bull. They had their party at the Red Bull factory today, which, as I've always mentioned, is not a million miles away from where I'm sat right now. The whole Vegas thing that we talked about on the show, IndyCar has got the chance to get in here and get some of these fans involved, and they're just not doing it. And it's a real shame because the last couple of years in the championship has been fantastic. Great racing, some really, really good stuff, and no one's seeing it. And it really should. They just do better, IndyCar, really.
Yeah, well, with the news from Honda, you have to wonder what the teams powered by Honda are thinking. Chip Ganassi Racing is a Honda team. Alex Palous won 2 of the last 3 titles in the series with Honda Power. Andretti Global, that's another Honda team potentially expanding over to Formula One with, ironically, strong support from General Motors and Cadillac Branding, which also owns Chevrolet, Honda's only competition in the series. CART began its downfall once Penske, Ganassi, Toyota, and Honda left, leaving only Ford and smaller teams. So, Matt, I've got to ask the question. I know we were talking about it a little bit backstage as well, but is it an overreaction to be fearful that, at least in its current form, IndyCar may not survive until the end of the decade?
Obviously, we hope, massively hope not. The 500 will survive in some shape or form, won't it? Because, of course, it ran for so long, 100 years ago, without being part of the championship. But yeah, they just need some glimmer, the Kevin Harvick golden horseshoe, to come along to IndyCar and give them a kick up the butt, really, because if they do lose Honda, then, as I said, use the quote that I mentioned when we were chatting about before the show, IndyCar becomes American F2 that also goes on ovals with a single aero kit and a single engine supplier. Just another rung on the junior single-seater ladder that just happens to have a couple of high 30s and low 40-year-olds in it. It just needs. We were all so excited when Roger Penske took it over. Here we go. Someone's got hold of this. That's in. It's not someone that's just picked it up as a business venture. There's skin in the game here. And I know we've had COVID and all those things. It just has not happened for IndyCar, relatively speaking, in the business side of things over the last couple of years. The on-track product is fantastic, but as I said before, if no one's watching it, then what can you do? And it just needs to kick up the bum.
Yeah, and that's the biggest tragedy in all of this, I think, is that, the series does have phenomenal racing, fantastic racing. Even with Alex Palou being so dominant last year, I thought we had some great racing last season. It's just not as many people are watching it because you're not putting yourselves out there from the marketing standpoint, and you got all the behind-the-scenes turmoil that we're talking about here. I mean, again, I'm not saying I would put money on the IndyCar series not making it out of a decade, but at the same time, you have to look at all these things pooled together. And again, as I said backstage, to borrow a phrase from Kyle Busch, everything is not so great over in IndyCar land at the moment. And it's real unfortunate because I was with you. I thought to myself, there's nobody more qualified. I still remember, and this is back in the days when I was doing the photo finish on Scout Radio 4 or 5 years ago at my college. That's how it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it's a pre-COVID sort of thing. Time's kind of stood still for the last several years. It feels like yesterday and a decade ago at the same time. But I said in that moment, I can't think of anybody more qualified to make this purchase than Roger Penske. And there was so much anticipation and so much excitement that here's some new blood coming into the ownership here, and they're going to, have a different perspective on things. And Roger certainly knows how to run his businesses. And it just, again, I know you had the unfortunate timing with COVID and everything, but it just has not worked out very well. And the series has really struggled to come out of that and rebound. And things, unfortunately, look like they're just getting worse here. And they seem to think that the solution to all this potentially is going down the NASCAR path of creating a charter system, because that's worked so well over in NASCAR, right? And we haven't had a single team close their doors since 2016, and we have all these open entries and full 40-car fields every. Oh, wait a second, that's not the case, is it?
No. Again, just surrounding the pot here, and we're going to have this like for the 500, of course, where we have our extra entries and things. If you're not part of this club, you can't come in. A bit like we've been talking about with Formula One over the last 6 months with the Andretti story as well, to some degree. But just, again, the closed shop is just not what we need. Good evening, Joe. He says, I do think Roger and the team needs to have some hard discussions. Do they have the best team available to lead IndyCar? That's again, I
It's a fair
guess,
question.
a question that they need to ask themselves over this winter and into the new season.
Yeah, well, and then Joe, following up here as well, my concern is IndyCar could get bought up by someone like NASCAR or Disney, and then NASCAR would be really interesting to
Wow.
consider that one. But a big firm, I think, is the general point Joe's trying to make, wanting to repeat what Liberty has done with Formula One. I'll tell you this, from a marketing standpoint, I think the Liberty era of F1 has been phenomenal. I think they have done so much more, exponentially more than what F1 did under the Bernie Ecclestone era, if you will, especially here in the United States. And the proof of that is impossible to deny. But, there's the concerns again, you're going down the entertainment road of wanting to do all these sprint races and wanting to expand the calendar out to the point where you're exhausting these teams. So it's kind of a, either or situation there. What exactly do you want from somebody like that buying the series? You're probably going to get some good things from a marketing standpoint and a brand standpoint, but from an on-track standpoint, it might not be what you're hoping for.
Yeah, to kind of expand on what I was mentioning about Formula One earlier, they captured the lightning in the bottle with the Netflix and the pandemic. Everyone was sat at home with nothing to watch. Yeah. Unfortunately, the cork is slightly coming out of that bottle now this season with Formula One, and they're trying to put it back in and make sure they don't lose it. Hyde Jackson, he says, please give me words of comfort. Everything's going to be okay in IndyCar. We're trying.
Yeah. And, man, it's funny you say that because I think that's true to an extent. But even still, I feel like I was starting to notice a shift even in 2019. Like, I think, obviously everybody being sat at home with nothing to watch and it being on the front page of Netflix really accelerated it. But I think even then, just before COVID, being on Netflix, having that platform and improving your marketing, improving your social media and everything, I think that alone, even before the pandemic started, went a long way in improving things. I mean, again, I'm talking specifically from a United States standpoint. You might be able to speak a little bit to if there's been an uptick over in Europe, where Formula One's always had a pretty big following. But again, I think even just as soon as Liberty got in, they really improved the marketing side of things. But again, Jackson saying we cannot have NASCAR buy out IndyCar or Liberty. I don't know that that's trying to find the right word here, but that's the right business model, so to speak, that you want to repeat, word for word exactly, so to speak. I don't know if that's what you want either. And finally, Adam Lemery is saying IndyCar needs more oval racing, head to places like Richmond and New Hampshire. Well, I could certainly get on board with New Hampshire now that I'm in the New England area. We're supposed to go back to Richmond in 2020. That didn't happen because of the pandemic, and that hasn't been brought back. But again, we'll bring it back to Penske here real quick, and then we'll move on. This has been a common theme, I think, of his administration, so to speak, that you have him coming out and saying, oh, yeah, well, we're working on a third engine supplier. We'd love to have more ovals on the schedule. I don't think you can really use the pandemic excuse anymore. It's going to be 2024 here in just a few weeks. We've really come out of that, downtime that, things weren't quite so open and there were some restrictions. I mean, almost all of that is gone at this point. So we're at a stage now where I feel like, obviously you can't add tracks to the schedule overnight. And I love that Milwaukee's back. Don't get me wrong, but I hate that it came at the expense of Texas. I hate that Richmond's not back on the schedule. I hate that the East Coast, really is kind of shut out of this series right now. When you think of all the great racetracks, and it's not just ovals either. Why are we not going to Watkins Glen? Why are we not, looking at other cities, on the eastern side of the country where you could maybe do a street race like you did in Baltimore, like you wanted to do in Boston? I think there's some great opportunities there, but it's kind of been, my thing is, there's the country music song, a little less talk and a lot more action. That's kind of what I feel like the IndyCar series needs to do right now. We're hearing all this talk. Where's the action? Where's the actual, where are the actual changes being put into place so that we can see the evidence of your talk here? And I think that's really lacking at the moment.
That's another thing that's on IndyCar's to-do list, is to get a new car.
Yeah. And again, I brought this up on Roundtable this weekend as well. I know we've had different eras of aero kits and we've made tweaks here and there. We, added the aero screen. Obviously that changes things to an extent, but for all intents and purposes, the main chassis, the main car is still the same DW12 you introduced, in 2012, 12 years ago. So, I mean, there's been absolutely no, well, I shouldn't say that again because the aero kits, but there's been minimal development on that side of things as well. And You know,
somebody said, I can't remember who I was listening to on a podcast at some point this week, that said IndyCar is now a historic racing championship running to a contemporary championship with the 12-year-old car.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great line.
Yeah. Honestly,